It's a pleasure to address the TEFAF Summit today as someone who has spent many years working with colleagues across Europe to strengthen our shared democratic values and cultural cooperation. Over the years, TEFAF has established itself as one of the most respected international platforms for dialogue between the worlds of art, culture, scholarship and the market. The summit in particular has become an important space where curators, collectors, institutions and policymakers can reflect together on the future of cultural heritage and cultural investment. The discussion that have taken place in previous editions have shown how essential it is to bring this perspective together. Culture does not exist in isolation. It lives through institutions, through communities, through public policy, and through the networks that connect people across Europe and beyond. Culture connects people across borders, inspires creativity, and enriches our societies. Yet cultural investment are judged only by narrow economic metrics rather than for its full social, educational, human and democratic value. In my work in this house, in the European Parliament, I have seen how culture builds bridges, it fosters understanding, combats exclusion and reinforces our common European identity. Investing in culture means investing in community resilience, well-being and a shared sense of purpose. I hope this conversation will help strengthen the recognition of culture as a fundamental pillar of Europe's social fabric and its future prosperity. I would like to wish you all a very, very productive and inspiring summit, and I hope the discussions taking place in Maastricht will continue to shape the future of cultural cooperation in Europe. So thank you very much to all of you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of the TEFAF Summit, an initiative that we started at TEFAF alongside the two fairs which we run because, of course, we are a foundation. The past editions of this summit have focused on the importance of the public and private sectors working together and to arm you all and many others with examples of case studies and benchmarks so that you can take these ideas into sort of a practical tool to go and make a difference in the cultural sector. It is important to us to also advocate for culture because whilst, well, essentially the only reason we're all sitting in this room is that we all believe in culture, we know that it can be difficult for others to really believe in investing in it. There are much more eloquent speakers than myself today who can explain why and how to engage with others on this important subject. But I would like to just point out two organisations in particular who have supported us, first from the very start as an art fair for more than 20 years, AXA XL, our global lead sponsor, and you will hear shortly from Sylvie Glaise, who is CEO of Singapore for AXA XL, and also from the Netherlands Commission for UNESCO, Kathleen Ferrier. But just before I hand over to the president of TEFAF, Boris Vervoort, I would like to thank you all for being here, thank our panelists, and most importantly, perhaps from a more personal perspective, and I'm sorry to take that opportunity, to thank Simone Stuns and Janneke Luns from the TEFAF team who have put this all together. Thank you.
Good morning. TEFAF Maastricht has been a defining part of my professional and even personal life. What makes TEFAF so special is not only its exceptional quality and scholarship amongst its dealers, but also its deep connection with Maastricht and Limburg. The city is not simply the host, it's part of the fair's identity and DNA. An identity we've been building on in close collaboration with our long-term partner, AXA XL. The atmosphere here, the international community that gathers each year, and the engagement with museums, collectors, and scholars create something that feels both global and deeply rooted in this place. For many long-standing exhibitors, returning to Maastricht each year feels less like attending an event, but more like coming home. That sense of continuity and community, of hospitality, reflects nearly 4 decades of partnership between TEFAF, the city of Maastricht, the province of Limburg, one that has shaped both the fair and the city. Looking ahead, we are excited to continue building on this partnership, working together towards shared goals in science and technology, knowledge exchange, and the advancement of education. With sincere thanks to the city of Maastricht and the province of Limburg, it's my pleasure to present this report to Stefan Satijn, the Regional Minister for Economy, Finance and Business Operations and Public Affairs of the province of Limburg. And I think he's soon going to come.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Boris.
Would you like to have a microphone?
I have a microphone, so not
No, it's working.
switch off. Thank you, Boris, and thank you for inviting me here this morning. I believe I'm also in one of your panels, so I think I'm going to elaborate a bit more on this beautiful report. Born and raised in Maastricht, so everything that Will said also affects myself because I'm part of the DNA here. So I'll sure go into much more detail on that in the panel discussion. But Boris, Mr. Voort, I must say, thank you very much for this report. It's really valuable, not only to us, but for the whole society here in Limburg. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sylvie Glaise. I flew from Singapore to be here today, and I can tell you, in the world we're living, this wasn't easy. So you may wonder, what am I doing here? Because my day job is to serve as the CEO for AXA XL in Asia. Well, my passion job, my evening job, and my weekend job is to oversee the partnership between AXA and TEFAF. And once a year, I feel very privileged to fly to Maastricht to attend the fair, which is my favorite one. I've been always passionate about art and culture since my childhood, and I ended up in insurance. AXA and TEFAF have a very long-standing relationship for 22 years. I believe we have grown this partnership between our two institutions to something that is unparalleled. Why has this been possible? Because of shared values: trust, engagement, a search for excellence, and a common commitment to protecting cultural heritage and the desire to have an impact beyond art. As a leading insurer in fine art, obviously we believe protecting the unique goes beyond the insurance contract. Of course, you need insurance to protect the artists, the institutions, the works of art, the private collectors, the exhibitions, but our mission is also to strengthen the cultural ecosystem. This is why we have recently created a new vehicle at AXA Group level to support our ambition, the AXA Foundation for Human Progress, which brings together the group's cultural, scientific, environmental, and social commitment. Firmly focused on the future and the pursuit of innovation, the culture pillar of the foundation aims to support the emergence of new artists by encouraging boldness and risk-taking, both in the supported creations and the partnerships we develop. Support for creation and cultural innovation also seeks to address contemporary economic, social, and educational challenges. And our partnerships with institutions like the Opéra Comique, the Villa Albertine, the national manufacturers, reflect our belief that today's artistic and scientific innovations forms the heritage of tomorrow. Art endures thanks to this balance between imagination and care. And applied on a global scale, the balance will help cultural heritage continue to strengthen social cohesion and inspire a sustainable and inclusive future for all. And today, we have traveled from all around the world, united by a shared passion for art. And in a world that is fragmented and uncertain and where conflicts divide us, art remains one of humanity's most powerful unifiers. It transcends borders and politics, it carries memories across generations, and it connects us to history itself. This is why today's symposium, Beyond Economic Impact, Rethinking Culture in Public Policy, is so important. Because we have so much at stake, and it's essential that we invest in culture to ensure it is protected for the generations to come. And I would like to thank all the panelists who will share their expert perspectives and hopefully give us a bit of optimism today. And thank you obviously to TEFAF and to UNESCO Netherlands for making this possible. On that note, I wish you a great summit. I hope you enjoyed the fair as well. And I will hand over to Kathleen Ferrier, the Chair of UNESCO for Netherlands Commission. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good morning, esteemed guests, colleagues and friends. It's both an honor and a privilege to welcome you all today on behalf of the Netherlands Commission for UNESCO. My name is Kathleen Ferrier and I am the chair of our National Commission. I'm delighted to be here for the third consecutive year as a content partner of this distinguished summit, a wonderful initiative that sets TEFAF apart from many other art fairs worldwide. But first of all, I would like to express our sincere thanks to TEFAF for this and our fellow participants this year. We are delighted to once again participate in the TEFAF Summit as the National Commission for UNESCO. UNESCO, the United Nations educational, scientific and cultural organization, is dedicated to the protection of cultural heritage, the promotion of education and science, and the support of cultural diversity worldwide. And as a National Commission, we work alongside local and international partners to promote and strengthen UNESCO's values, fostering a society that is united through culture, creativity, and collaboration. Last year, we gathered here to explore the relationship between culture and trust-based philanthropy. Those conversations were rich, challenging, and ultimately generative. And I'm proud to share with you today that the outcomes of that symposium have been published in our new, recently published report Onbetaalbaar, investeren in erfgoedgemeenschappen. A title that, again, is beautifully untranslatable. Onbetaalbaar, meaning both priceless and beyond payment of heritage communities. The publication brings together the key insights from our dialogues here at TEFAF and the broad research on financing heritage communities we did throughout 2025. I warmly encourage you to explore it. It is, we believe, a meaningful contribution to the broader conversation about the true value of culture and heritage, a conversation we happily continue today. And this year, as many of you know, has a special significance. UNESCO celebrates its 80th anniversary. 80 years ago, on the ruins of the Second World War, the founders of UNESCO made a radical wager. That lasting peace could not be built on politics and economics only, but had to be constructed in the minds of people. Since wars begin in the minds of people, reads the preamble of UNESCO's constitution, it is in the minds of people that the defenses of peace must be constructed. That founding conviction has never felt more urgent. And to mark this anniversary, the Netherlands Commission for UNESCO is proud to present the exhibition Zij maakt het verschil, She makes the difference, at the Photo Museum in The Hague. The exhibition features 18 remarkable women whose work is related to UNESCO in the Netherlands, each photographed by the acclaimed Dutch photographer Carla van de Puttelaar. Their stories are stories of quiet courage, persistent dedication, and the belief that culture, education, and science can change the world. The exhibition runs until the end of April, and I warmly recommend you to visit it. But anniversaries are not only moments for celebration, they are also moments for reflection and reflection on urgency. The world in 2026 is not the world that UNESCO's founders imagined 80 years ago. Democratic backsliding, armed conflicts, attacks on science and the free press, the erosion of multilateral institutions, these are today's headlines. And they are not distant threats, they affect all of us. In this context, the question is not whether UNESCO's mission remains relevant after 80 years, that is self-evident. The real question is, who will take responsibility? And I tell you, we cannot wait for others to act. The responsibility is ours, collectively, and each one of us individually. And with this, we arrive at the heart of today's theme, beyond economic impact, rethinking culture in public policy. And I will confess to you, I find it remarkable, year after year, that we still feel obliged to justify the value of culture in economic terms. The figures speak for themselves. Research by the Boekman Stichting and Dutch Culture, among others, consistently demonstrates that the return on investment in culture is extraordinary. International cultural cooperation pays dividends far exceeding its costs. Culture drives tourism, innovation, social cohesion, and economic resilience. And yet, the economic argument alone is insufficient, because culture is not primarily an investment vehicle. Culture is what makes us human. It is not only about visiting a museum or attending a concert, though those experiences matter enormously. Culture lives in the rituals and traditions of our daily lives, in the stories we pass down through generations, in the intangible heritage that gives communities their identity and their sense of continuity. These, my dear friends, are not luxuries. They are the connective tissue of a society. Think for a moment of the IJsinga Planetarium in Franeker. Built in 1781 by a wool comber named IJsinga in his own living room, because he wanted to understand the movement of the planets. This modest but extraordinary place was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2023. And you may ask, what does a working class man's curiosity from the 18th century have to do with defending democracy in the 21st century? I tell you, everything. Because a society that protects and celebrates such places is a society that believes in knowledge, in curiosity, in wonder, in a possibility that ordinary people like you and me can illuminate the universe. And that belief is worth defending. Allow me also to say a word about the broader geopolitical moment. With the United States having stepped back from its role as a guarantor of multilateral cultural cooperation, including its withdrawal from UNESCO, the responsibility on the rest of the world has grown heavier. The Netherlands, with its proud tradition of international engagement and collaboration, must step forward, not because it is convenient, but because it is right. A resilient democracy is not only a well-functioning parliament, it's not only an independent judiciary, it is more than its democratic institutions. It is a society that is connected through shared culture, shared memories, and shared values. Dear guests, what unites everyone in this room is one conviction, that art, culture, heritage, and creativity are not peripheral to human story. They are the human story. At this moment, when so much what we value is under pressure, we, the people in this room, collectors, dealers, scholars, policymakers, advocates, we all together have both the privilege and the obligation to make the case for culture. Not defensively, not apolitically, but with confidence, with evidence, and with passion. UNESCO was founded on the belief that culture is a force for peace. 80 years on, that belief is not naive, it is powerful, and it is necessary. And it is ours to act upon. Thank you, and welcome to the TEFAF Summit 2026.
I did say there were much more eloquent speakers than me, so thank you very much, Kathleen. That was wonderful to hear how we try and continuously try to make others understand the importance of culture. You're absolutely right that the economic impact and the close connection between private investment or indeed public investment in culture is rarely properly measured, and when it is, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference for some reason. However, a project that we started more than a year ago was an attempt to give another example of how culture can really make a difference. And we're incredibly lucky, with almost 40 years in Limburg, in Maastricht,
to run an art fair here that is both as supported by, but more importantly, in partnership with the local city and province. When we started this project, it was firmly in the mind of giving another tool, another example for others to be able to use to demonstrate the power of culture. And throughout this process, it has been really, when you consider how the economic impact is just a small part of everything that you're trying to tell, that you start going through a report and you think, well, it's not really counting the cultural value, it's not really counting the social value or the value in health. And that is, of course, one of the main reasons why we decided to do those topics in the summit today. It was not an intention to go thoroughly and deeply into these topics, but rather to find those examples that might help you advocate for cultural investment. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our colleagues from Deloitte Luxembourg, who have worked tirelessly on this report for more than a year. And then we will dive into that topic and much else on our first panel shortly afterwards. Thank you very much, and happy listening.
Well, thank you, Will, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today and have the opportunity to present to you the result of our work in front of such an esteemed audience. So my name is Justin. I'm a corporate finance and strategy partner at Deloitte Luxembourg, and I'm here with my colleague Louis, who's a senior manager in the team. So the report we published today was commissioned by TEFAF and conducted by us as part of an independent research program. The purpose of this study is fourfold. Number one, evaluate the economic impact of the 2025 fair on the region of Maastricht and the broader Dutch economy. Number two, make a clear distinction along the way between direct and indirect impact and where these are located. Number three, discuss the role TEFAF not only has as a cultural institution, but also as a key economic driver. And number four, provide a clear, independent and transparent evidence base for policymakers and stakeholders. So before we dive in, I'd like to make two preliminary remarks. First of all, in this report and in this presentation, every time we use the word Maastricht, we refer to the broader Maastricht region, including the wider Limburg region, as well as neighboring area. Number two, we are going to talk a lot about economy, but I would like to reiterate what Will just said. One should not forget the role TEFAF has in terms of social and cultural impact. This is also described in the report, even though, of course, less measurable and quantifiable. So let's now look at research methodology. So to derive TEFAF Maastricht total economic impact, we use three different sources of data. We use raw data, which includes surveys to various stakeholders, visitors, exhibitors that were conducted during the 2025 fair. As you can see, we collected more than 1,150 answers. It also included questionnaires and interviews that were run with the city of Maastricht, the airport, the MACC, TEFAF itself, and so on and so forth. And finally, TEFAF internal records and ticketing data related to the 2025 fair. These raw data were complemented by secondary data, notably public statistics from the OECD, and the Netherlands official statistics, as well as international benchmarks. And finally, we fed our analysis with economic models that are widely accepted to measure economic impact. Two of them in particular that I would like to point out: the input-output framework that enables to model how direct spending circulates into the regional economy to generate additional economic activity, and the equivalent advertising value model that enables you to estimate the monetary value of TEFAF media coverage. So the total economic impact we derive is based on several drivers that can be clustered into two categories. First category is the direct economic impact, which includes four key drivers: the impact of the exhibitors, the impact of the visitors, the impact of the organizer itself, as well as other ancillary impact. And then the second bucket consists in the indirect economic impact, which is made up of the multiplier effect of direct spending on the Dutch economy, as well as media impact for Maastricht itself. Now, before we present to you the results, it is very important for me to be extremely clear about what we mean by total economic impact. The total economic impact means the quantifiable impact of TEFAF Maastricht, both direct and indirect, on the Dutch economy. Now, that being said, not all the impact associated with the fair can be measured or quantified, and our results are naturally limited by the scope of our analysis. Some potentially relevant impact were not included in our scope. If I take a few examples, the direct economic spillover beyond Maastricht, TEFAF-related events or initiatives that were not directly captured by our data, or potentially additional art transactions and the related tax revenues that may have occurred elsewhere in the Netherlands following TEFAF. These are all examples which conceptually are part of the broader economic impact of the fair, but which were not quantified as part of our analysis. So in a nutshell, what you need to remember is that the results we are presenting today have to be interpreted as conservative estimates. So let's now look at the results themselves. Overall, what we found for the 2025 fair is a total economic impact on the Netherlands of 86.4 million, of which 37.9 for Maastricht. The economic impact for Maastricht is made up of 32.3 million direct impact, coming from the exhibitor, the visitors, and the organizers mostly, and 5.6 million of media impact. So to help you appreciate what we mean by media impact, there are three KPIs that I would like to highlight here. For the 2025 fair, 52 million people were reached by the media coverage. 108 newspapers and magazine articles were published. And finally, TEFAF broadcast reached 9.4 million viewers. And at last, if we look at visitors, which are of course a key contributor to the direct economic impact, some statistics, there are a few KPIs that you can see on the slide. Some statistics that I would like to highlight is in 2025, the number of entries registered was nearly 48,000, and the fair had 41,000 unique visitors. I'm now going to let my colleague Luis zoom further into the drivers behind those economic impact results.
Thank you, Justin. So let's spend a couple of minutes detailing the key components of the impact assessment. We'll start with the direct impact. So we estimate a direct impact of 52 million. The key components of the direct impact are the exhibitor's impact, the visitor's impact, and TEFAF as an organizer itself. So for the 10 million of exhibitor's impact, it is composed of the expenses related to the fair, which is the design of the stands, bringing the artwork to the stands, transportation, insurance of the artwork, but also bringing the staff which stay during the preparation of the fair, the duration of the fair, and after the fair. On average, exhibitors involved 10 participants to prepare for this venue. The biggest component of the direct impact is the visitors' impact. They have expenses related to transportation, expenses related to the fair, where they have catering, beverages as well. But one of the key components is the 15 million of expenses related to the stay. As we saw, 80% of the visitors of the fair come from outside of the region, and they spend on average 2.7 nights in accommodations on the region. So this is one of the biggest impacts. We have 9 million of tax-related impact related to sales of arts that can be concluded in the Netherlands only. So it's a national tax impact deriving from the sales of artwork. Then we have TEFAF as an organizer of the fair, which has an impact of 70 million. As you know, we rent the MEC, we prepare the stands, design the stands, and have logistics as well as catering associated to it. So 52 million of direct impact. So moving on to the indirect impact, we have identified 34 million of indirect impact, composed mostly of the input-output model and the media impact. For the input-output model, it's a commonly used statistical approach for this type of exercise, where we have estimated that for each euro of direct impact generated nationally, it creates almost 60 cents of additional indirect impact throughout the Netherlands. For the media impact, what we have estimated is how much would it cost to have TEFAF Maastricht mentioned in the same magazines, articles, newsletters, newspapers, where TEFAF Maastricht is explicitly mentioned. So how much would it have cost for TEFAF to publicize itself on these same articles? So there you have it, 34 million of indirect impact. Now moving on to the impact within the Maastricht region, which we have estimated at almost 38 million for the fair in 2025. We have 52 million, as we have established before, of direct economic impact, to which we have excluded national impact. These are impacts from suppliers who are not exclusively working or established in the region of Maastricht. It's also the tax impact, which happens at the national level, and some of the costs incurred by the visitors, which stay at the national level. So we have shortlisted or identified 32 million of direct impact, and then we have added the media impact, which brings the exposure or the economic value of the exposure to 38 million for the 2025 event. So total economic impact for the fair in 2025, 86 million. Direct impact for the Maastricht region, almost 40 million. And we wanted to emphasize the sustainable impact that TEFAF has had in the region, and we calculated the impact that the fair has had over the last 8 years. So we have identified an impact of almost 640 million, which is taking base on the 2025 impact. We have accounted for the number of visitors throughout the year and discounted for purchase power parity. So a very impactful number that shows the lasting impact of TEFAF Maastricht. Conscious of time, we'd like to emphasize that TEFAF drives much more than economic impact. It provides a platform that expands access to art. It provides a platform for new artists, exhibitors to network. It provides a platform for local cultural institutions to collaborate with international partners. But it activates the MEC also as a cultural hub, and we'd like to emphasize also the importance of such cultural events, of introducing art and culture to the new generation. And it's all the more important in this international context to transpire the values of art to the next generation and transpire that culture was much beyond just economic impact. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good
morning. Can I speak to Stefan?
Please do so.
Okay, perfect. I think you should sit here. No?
Okay.
Where you want? There?
For the viewers on the right, that would be convenient.
So good morning everyone, my name is Adriano Piccinati di Torcello. Sounds really Italian, but I'm born in Belgium. I'm even Luxembourgish now. I have even Dutch roots, Spanish roots. And I would like to say that first, thank you to many people from TEFAF for inviting me to moderate this panel today. So I would like to thank Hector, Will, Paul, Janneke, Simone, and the entire team of TEFAF again. So it's a pleasure to be there. So and congratulations for the amazing fair that you have organized. So we have 40 minutes to cover a really deep and important subjects. So economic impact and beyond. I have 3 great speakers and I will ask them to introduce themselves, not just for your info before we run the panel. So I would like just to say that on the Deloitte side, I'm running art and finance, something that I've been pushing for now 18 years at Deloitte, I'm in my 19 years. And this topic of economic impact, social impact is something that we've been looking for quite some time. This is something that we covered during our conference at the Vatican in 2022. So this is something that we also dedicated to full conference in 2024. So we recognize the importance of this subject, especially nowadays where public and private need to collaborate much more to support culture. So without further ado, I would like to ask my great panelists to introduce themselves. I may start with you, Victoria.
Yes. Well, my name is Victoria Simons van Grieken, and I'm director of Brabant C, Brabant Culture Fund, and it's a public-private fund for culture in the province of Brabant. It started 10 years ago, was initiated by the province of North Brabant, and in the last 3 years we developed a new way of working towards a public-private fund for culture.
And we'll talk more about that.
Yes.
Martin.
Martin Boberg. I'm a senior science advisor at AEA Consulting. And so in that role, I make sure that whatever we deliver for our clients actually meets the state of the art in research and science, including economic and other impact studies. And the reason I do this, and that's the second hat I wear, I'm also a professor at the University of Lausanne who's done research over the past 15 years on economic, cultural, and environmental impact studies as well.
Last but not least, Stefan.
Steven Steijn, I'm the Regional Minister for Economics and Finance in the province of Limburg, and as I said in my small conversation with the chair of the TEFAF, born and raised in Maastricht, so these events and the TEFAF itself makes me a very proud Regional Minister.
Thank you. So let's kick off. Stefan, as you are Regional Minister for Economy, Finance, Business Operation and Public Affairs for the Limburg region, how are you involved in cultural policy and cultural initiative in the region, and how do you see culture contributing directly and indirectly to Limburg's economy, for example through jobs, innovation, tourism and attractiveness for businesses and talents?
Well, that's again a
big question.
A big question with a big title for the Regional Minister. Let me start with emphasizing how important I think the address was of Kathleen Ferrier. I was very much impressed by her speech when it comes to the role of art and science in our society, to say so. And when we look at this beautiful report, and thank you very much for constructing that for us on behalf of TEFAF, of course, which gives us a lot of insight again on the economics. And what we think and are convinced of in Limburg is that art and science and culture by itself play a much more larger role than economics and economists think. So when it comes to the role of that, we have a specific point of entry in our government where we make sure that culture, art and science are part of our society. So it's of very big importance, bigger than economics, I would say. And that also has to be the case because if you look at Maastricht, our region, we go back for hundreds and hundreds of years. So we started with the Romans. So cultural heritage, the reason why we are here, also from a cultural, but also from an economic point of view, because we start here at the crossroads of Roman roads, is far more important to us and far more part of our legacy than, let's say, our economics that are at the moment in place. So we try to combine it as much as possible. We are very much engaged in the fact that not only this fair, but science and art play a huge role in our society, who we want to be, who our companies want to be, how they would like to be attracted to the area. So for us, it's a very, very important matter.
Thank you. So you are really monitoring culture and its role for the visibility, the reputation of the province.
Absolutely. We have 3 provincial musea, for instance. So we keep investing in the fact that art and culture, but also science, innovation, and that's a pretty important point which I discussed the last couple of days also with the organization of the TEFAF, is how can we more combine these elements, not only in our society, but also in the TEFAF itself. I mean, the numbers that you show here are impressive, but we think, and we is also the organization of the TEFAF and our government, that for the future there can be, let's say, a better model to combine.
Okay, we will continue that later. Victoria, so you just already introduced a little bit what is Brabantse, but maybe can you tell us a bit more about Brabantse Fund, and how do you see its role or your role in linking culture with regional and national prosperity? So I have many questions for her in one question.
Okay.
So that's first part. When you select projects, how do you balance criteria such as artistic quality, innovation, reach, and economic potential? And finally, so
4th question.
we get fine. My last question to you: to what extent do you already ask for evidence of economic or broader impact for the projects that you support?
All right.
And you have 4 minutes just to increase the chance.
Okay, let's go. Brabantse, at the first question was the core.
What is Brabantse?
Brabantse, yes. Our core mission is to not only fund culture, but to raise the overall funds for culture, the available funds. So we inspire private partners, companies, to invest in culture with us. And with us, we are a fund, but we are lucky, and that was very important, that the province decided to have a part of the funds available for culture, so that we can invite private partners to co-fund with us, because that's our basic principle. We focus primarily on societal impact when we select projects. And it's important because in a region like the province of Brabant and also the Brainport region, it's a technological, very advanced and fast-growing region. The cities are growing. So for us, it's an essential part of the economy that we also invest more in culture. That the growth and the development of the region, that culture is a big part of it, the cultural infrastructure. And it's also because I think it's a different way of looking towards funding culture, not subsidizing, but focusing more on partnerships. So let companies work together with governments and with cultural and artists to see where you can jointly make impact and where you can have complementary aims, and then set up a program together. So we started to develop a way of working, tailor-made, in which, and it was pioneering. I mean, we had no blueprint in the beginning. It was see what are the developments, what are the main drivers, and we saw that on a provincial level, you have the main driver still is societal impact, but in different cities you have different emphasis on topics, and where partners want to join. And when we select project, for us, therefore, artistic quality is equally important on the social impact you want to make. So that's
I think, and we will dive in a little bit further when we will ask for real examples. But is this something that you have in Limburg?
Well, we don't have the exact fund like Brabant has. But what we do by ourselves, we have a very strong policy when it comes to a broader cultural picture. So as I said, we have the 3 provincial musea. That's very important to us, so we invest a lot of money in that. But a fund like Brabant has, we do not have.
So maybe something to learn from.
It's always inspiring to be with you in the panel. So
perfect. Thank you. We'll continue. So, Martin. Sorry, Nicolas.
It's a nice name, Nicolas.
Nicolas is also nice.
Maybe I change later on, but gave me an idea there.
So you work mainly internationally, so you are based in Swiss, but I know quite well AEA Consulting. We are good partners in some cases. How is the role of culture as an economic driver, especially for innovation, employment and tourism, currently framed by government and major institutions? I may pause that because I have additional questions to you, but maybe first let's go to this question. What is your point of view on that?
Yeah. So what we see at AEA is certainly that the economic aspect is becoming more and more important, and we're doing many of the studies for different clients. Can be governments, can be major institutions, can be fairs as well. And it depends always a little bit on who approaches us as well, right? So often the governments will be interested actually in comparing different options in different ways they can structure their funding activities. And this is where it becomes really interesting, because then you have points of comparison actually among different policy options that you have, and that you can say, okay, if you do this, you get this economic impact there on those sectors, but if you invest in something else, you'll get different type of impact. And so this was the point where you can align it with policy objectives and say, okay, if you want to develop tourism, well, you should rather invest in this kind of museum or in this kind of fair or event, for example. But they are also getting much more sensitive to the idea that not all of culture can always have an economic impact. And I think this is the important distinction that we need to make, is to say, okay, if you want to really create uniqueness, a cultural distinction, and be different from other regions, you need to have some spaces that are protected, where the new ideas thrive and develop, and that's something we also see in science. You know, science can have an economic impact, but if you only do science or culture that has an economic impact, you're losing the ferment at the beginning. I think that's something that we try and make our clients aware of at the very beginning. What are also the limits that we're talking about of economic impact?
Yeah, and for sure this is going to be further developed in the day-to-day. But now, what are the main trends that you see in terms of measuring cultural impact? So in terms of methodology, so how these tools are refined or still in kind of infancy?
Yeah. So economic impact analysis, like Justin just presented it, has been around for, I would say, the better part of 50 years, right? So this is an econometric tool. What you can do and how well you can do it depends a lot on the national and regional context and the statistics that are available. So in the United States, for example, you have extremely detailed statistics and input-output tables. If you go to emerging economies, you're much more dependent on estimates. The methodologies actually in economic impact specifically are very well established, and they don't develop very much. Sometimes the data get more precise. What is often key is what are the assumptions behind a figure that is reported. For example, what are the assumptions around this 86 million? And that was very clear today, right? Because there are many assumptions often. And when you start varying the assumptions, you often massively change the figure that is there in the end, right? Sometimes I see economic impact studies of the same event, let's say, that vary by the factor of 10, and both are legitimate, but they have different assumptions. That's economic impact, cultural impact, and social impact, environmental impact, still very much in its infancy. Although that's where we need to see the most development, and I think we'll talk later why it's still at this early stage.
Perfect. So we have covered a little bit kind of a general intro on economic impact. Now let's dive in a little bit into concrete case studies. So Stefan, yes, it's me. So what are the benefits from your perspective of measuring the economic impact of cultural events such as TEFAF, so the report that you just got? And how do such numbers actually influence or could influence decision at the government level? And do you think economic impact studies should become kind of a regular tool for major cultural events? So are we going to give more money now to...
Let's start with the last part of your question. I would say yes. I think it's also a matter of when you're in the public area like I am, you always have to, of course, make sure that everybody understands why you are spending money on the several levels that you're spending money on. But it's not only to justify, let's say, the level of money that you are contributing to these elements. It's also to explain what you're doing and to create awareness about the importance of, in this case, art and culture play has a role in society. I'm part of the political arena, to say so. There is always the case that you have to explain why you are doing the things you are doing. But I'm far more interested from the other level of discussion we had is what is it really contributing? And with that, you can also explain what the role of art and culture is. So I'm very much interested in the area that Martin was explaining. You see that in the social area and in the cultural area, there's, let's say, a lower degree of development when it comes to statistics or research on the contribution part. And I would be very interested, also as a policymaker, to play a role in that, to make that more visible, more transparent, so we can explain to each other, not so much justify, but explain to each other why we are doing the things we are doing. So from both parts, yes, it's very important. I'm very happy with the initiative of TEFAF to come up with this report. I'm very happy with the way your company has contributed with, let's say, with your team to come up with these results. But I'm interested in more of the background, beyond what's in the, let's say, the real hard economic data, to say so.
Okay, and maybe another report on the social impacts.
You're doing well for your company.
So let's do that.
Answer is yes. I would be very interested, but not as a way to justify on a political level, but also to explain, also in the political arena, but also to our society on which behalf we make these contributions.
But you really see the demand for
absolutely, absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Victoria, one of your key partners is ASML. So I guess you all know what is ASML, so they create these little chips that I use for everything that you have in your pockets. So how did this collaboration started, and what motivated ASML to invest in culture? What kind of impact information does a partner like ASML want to see? So is it more economic? Is it more related to the social impact that you are creating through your investment? And can you share a concrete example with a couple of KPIs? So this is where we become very precise about how do you report those social impact, not economic impact.
Yes.
So again, a long question.
Yes. Well, first of all, the cooperation with ASML started in a very organic way. It was quite special because the momentum was, I think, right at the moment. I think, yeah, a bit more, 3-4 years ago, when the province gave us the assignment to start a public-private fund, ASML was developing their society and community engagement program. So culture is an essential part of that program, but not the only part. They have a very substantial program because they are, of course, aware of their impact on the total of the province, on the Brainport region. But so that's one. So they want to invest, give back to the communities, but also because they believe, like I said in the beginning, culture, among others, but also education and sports, etc., to be an essential part of the economic growth and vitality of the region. And within their society and community engagement program, partnerships is at the core of its vision. So they realize, for example, in culture, they are not a culture specialist. So they were looking for a partner and they, of course, you can imagine, they get a lot of requests in culture, sponsorship and funding. So they looked for a partner in culture, a professional partner, and that's where else. So it was a really natural fit. So that's how we started, also very organically. Some people think that this partnership took a long way. I think in 3 months we had our funding program ready. So because we had our impact criteria, what do we believe in culture, they had their criteria, and we merged it into one funding program for culture. And for us it was, of course, a very special case study, because obviously ASML is a special partner, and we realized that for a lot of companies it's not the same way of a level of funding, but in the end it was a very important, and still is an important, learning experience for both of us. So we started to jointly invest. It's based on 50-50, so it's really equal partnership. 50% of provincial funding, 50% of ASML funding, and that together is one funding program for culture. And the focus of that program is not the economic impact. So what ASML wants to see in reporting is primarily the social impact. And then you have to think about accessibility for culture, inclusion, but also social cohesion, and especially the different communities living in that region, international communities, for the livability and attractiveness of the region. So we don't report economically, no.
And if we take now a concrete example of cultural projects that you are supporting,
yeah.
So can you give us some social cohesion? How do you measure that?
We measure through raw data surveys only, basically, because for the economic and other data we don't use that to afterwards, only before, some for information, and it's only incidental projects. For example, in some exhibitions of bigger museums that we use economic data as well, touristic data, but for us we use KPIs like a net promoter score. So if the audience would like to recommend a certain project, but also if people were inspired by a project. And every project we select has a specific societal impact. It can be on a certain topic of society, and then we measure very dedicated amongst, also through surveys, if people are moved, inspired, if it changed, if they met different people from different communities, a lot of target group research. So we learned, for example, after the first year, that one of the big aims was to reach more internationals, and in the reports we saw that it didn't, that can still be improved. So then we learn from that and try to implement that in other projects.
And today, so how much fund do you deploy on culture, and how many projects?
Per year?
Yeah.
Well, we started in 2024, and that was a joint budget of not even $1 million. So we started, so partnership needs to grow. We started with 14 projects a year, and we also started only with the Brainport region, and now we are expanding through, because we have a provincial assignment. So now it's a bigger part of Brabant, and next year it will be almost the whole province of Brabant, and I think this year we will support over 20 projects per year, 20 to 25. Yeah, and it varies between bigger projects or smaller ones.
And how do you select projects? Because I guess so many people are coming to you.
Yes, yeah, a lot of we have a funding scheme like EU calls, where people can read, and then we made there was also a difficult issue in the beginning. People told me, well, will you select, and will the governance keep clear? And we made an impact committee, and of course I think it's obvious that 2 people from ASML are in that board, but focus on the financial and social reporting, and 1 person program from the society and community engagement program. And the primary part, 3 members, we selected independent cultural experts and an independent chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it still okay for you? Whoa, are you sleeping?
Hope not.
No. Okay, so let's continue. So we have 15 minutes to go, and after that we have 10 minutes for questions, so to the panelists, but also on the impact report in case you have any questions. Nicolas, no. Martin, so staying with concrete projects, so can you present or explain 2 international public cultural projects, 2 international cultural projects, 1 public, 1 private, and can you explain the cultural impact studies that you have made on those 2 projects? Specifically.
Okay, cultural impact or economic impact?
Economic impact.
Economic impact, okay, thank you. So in most cases I can't talk about client names, but I'll talk very generally, right? So you get an idea. So on the public one, one interesting thing we've been doing is we've been working with a country to set up its economic assessment and accounting system for culture. So what does it mean? Culture has a pretty unique problem, which is that many of its activities are captured in different categories or sectors of the economy. So economists have a way of slicing the economy into different sectors, transport, construction, media, and so on. And culture cuts across many of those, which makes it often difficult for cultural decision makers to really see the impact of culture. So one way of addressing this is to do what is called satellite accounting, which is a way of bringing together this impact of culture through different sectors into a satellite account, which is a separate account basically, that's added to the regular economic accounting, and which makes its impact more visible basically. There's quite a bit of work at the national economic level, because you need to do lots of things first. You need to say, okay, well, which sectors are concerned, how much of the sector are we talking about, and how do we measure this? And so it usually takes a couple of years to set this up, right? And not every project, some projects start and not every project goes to the end. But when it goes to the end, what you can see is that it gives two things to economic decision makers, but also cultural decision makers. The first one is it gives you a general assessment of the weight of the cultural sector in the whole economy, which is not very easily visible otherwise. And the second one is, because you can track it over time year after year, it gives you a sense of the growth of that economy. And what you usually see is that the growth of that economy is higher than the average growth of the economy. And so one of the ideas, of course, that if you want to invest public money, you want to invest it in fast-growing sectors. And this is a way of saying, okay, well, usually culture, in particular subsectors of culture, are faster growing than the average, which is a big economic shift in general. We're moving towards symbolic economy where immaterial outputs become really important. So that's kind of the public sector example. On the private sector example, I can give you an example where we were working with a client who wanted to open an arts and culture organization, and that client was very open to what it should be. There was a rough budget, and so part of the assignment was, well, give us an idea of what the different economic impacts would be if we choose different models. So if we make, I don't know, an art museum out of this, or shall we make a theater out of this, or shall we make perhaps an event out of this that repeats, right? And so in this way, kind of you have a fixed investment budget, and you can play through different assumptions of what this should be. Obviously for them, the economic impact was not the only result that was interesting. I mean, they had a cultural policy behind this. And they needed to make sure it fit into also the city in which this was going to happen, so that it was going to complement the cultural landscape. But that was a way where, before you do something, actually, you compare the different options. And perhaps also a question that, perhaps Stefan will be asking of the report is to say, okay, there's 86 million. Where is this? Is this good or bad? What do we need to grow this? Should it stay constant? It's a little bit also the comparison to other projects as well.
Okay, and what is the type of project that this kind of measurement applies to? So do you have to have big cultural projects, or this can also apply to smaller ones?
You can do it at all scales, but because the methodology is usually quite time-consuming, it often doesn't make sense to make it on smaller scales. I think where the methodology becomes really powerful is actually if you do it at a comparative scale, and you deploy it over several institutions or across a whole region, because then you have the same assumptions for every case that you're assessing, and that makes comparison really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so I would like to move a little bit into the future, and of course, here we talk mostly about public, but I would like to go more into also the private sector. So, Stefan, as you know, so budget is tough. We are lacking money for everything, and especially for culture. And if we would like to get more involved with the private sector, how would you see tools like economic impact and social impact useful to attract more, in brackets, investors, private investors in the cultural sector, And from a government point of view, so what would be your policy to develop such kind of things?
Well, we currently do already engage with private parties when it comes to joint investments, also in cultural events. So, but we are finalizing that model as we speak. As I answered earlier on one of your questions, for instance, when we take the case of the TEFAF itself, because we are right here, we have very strong conversations with the board here to make stepping stones for the future, how we can make that combination, keep track of the relevant audience, I would say, for TEFAF for the future, which is also changing over the years, of course, and make sure that both the public domain, so that's we and the city, for instance, but also the private sector is carefully engaged in that model that we are creating with each other. So at the moment, it's a very relevant topic, I would say, and we're finalizing that. And what you see is that most of the times when the public domain recognizes the importance of a certain area, for instance, the TEFAF, then private parties will follow very soon, I would say. So we are seeing, as we speak, that model works well, but we have to define it. We are still in conversations with each other, and hopefully we can announce a bit more on that later this year.
Thank you. Victoria, how a strong focus on impact help cultural organization to attract private investors? Of course, today we are working with ASML, so they were naturally oriented versus social impact. But if now you have to find additional patrons or partners, so what is this economic impact that can this economic impact measurement can play a role to attract those?
In our experience so far, not so much. I have to say, when we talk to new potential private funders for culture companies, it always starts with the conviction that culture is important, but also we also have some companies who maybe are lesser aware of, they think culture is important, but that's not primarily their focus, but they want to attract more talent, for example, to a region. We recently had a very inspiring, I think, example in Helmond. It's a city in Brabant where a group of SMEs, entrepreneurs, took the initiative themselves. They say, listen, creativity is one of the major skills for now and for the future to keep our talents, and we believe that the artists are masters of creativity, so let's invest in them to enrich our city. I think it was so inspiring. And the second, what was helping was what you mentioned, that we have the public support. So the province said already, we are matching your investment in culture. So that's, I think, an economic argument, because of course there are companies, they say, let's say we invest, for example, 50,000, and when we can match that with the provincial money, then it makes 100,000. So my societal investment in culture is doubled. So that's economic thinking, but it's a Catholic, it's helping it strengthens our case. So I think that's really important. So I really say to the province, it starts with public support, commitment. And then we see that these examples of companies are more and more. Like in Den Bosch, also interesting, very recent, is that a couple of companies in constructing, they are working in the city in different areas, neighborhoods, where they are renovating homes, of course, and building new houses. But they feel responsible to contribute, next to their commercial activities, also to the social cohesion in those. And they see culture so they see cultural partners and artists as essential partners to reach their societal aims. And then we build a coalition, because that's the difference between ASML and, of course, SMEs, that we say, okay, then let's build a coalition of companies. We join as a Brabant Safe Fund, and then you form a partnership. And what is nice about that, that's not only short-term project funding, so not only sponsor one artist and that's that. No, we really start maybe smaller amounts, a few partners, but then you inspire others to co-invest. So that's also very important.
And very quickly, do you see an increasing interest from private sector to support culture?
Yes, I really see that. Yes.
Very good. That's very positive. Yeah, sure.
May I add to that? Because not by coincidence, I know the Minister of Finance from Brabant, but becoming more transparent what the relevance is of the social and cultural impact, there's absolutely no tightness around budgets for these events. So what you see, you started your question, it's a bit challenging, I understand, is it becomes more constricted, the budget, but it's not the case. So what I see in Brabant, what I see in our own province, we are really willing to spend a relevant number of budgets on, let's say, the projects that you are mentioning.
So even more?
Even more.
Okay, very good. So 2 positive answers so today, so great.
I hope more, but let's go.
Sorry?
I hope some more.
No, some more, absolutely. So we have 4 minutes left. So last questions to you, Nicola. Now I'm calling you Nicola, Martin. So we have talked a lot about over-measuring economic impact. So you have talked also about the limits of that approach. In terms of framework, so we have the UNESCO here, so where do you see developments in terms of methodology that will encompass economic, social, and human value, so to measure culture?
Yeah, well, that's basically where the trend is going at the moment, right? And it's certainly going that way at the national level and at the regional level, and this is where UNESCO has very, very strong leadership as well. So UNESCO, for example, has the Common Framework on Cultural Statistics, which is relatively technical but important guidance on how to measure the role of culture, usually for governments, national governments, regional governments. And they've just updated this as well. And there's also guidance on measuring the impact of culture, again for national governments in cities mostly. So I think there's some good guidance there, because it's not that we are lacking ideas of how to measure or assess social, cultural, environmental impact. There's lots of good research out there as well. I think we need to wrap our heads around 2 main challenges. The first challenge is there's relatively little accepted or shared guidance for individual institutions or events. But that's where often the lever of change is. And the one lever of change is through policy. The other one is, of course, from individual institutions becoming very educated around this and very vocal and vociferous and pushing for change. And that would be kind of the bottom-up part. And so there's very little unified guidance around this. And part of the work we're doing at AEA is to say, okay, well, what are models actually in which we can have both economic impact and all those other kinds of impact? And that brings me to the second challenge, which is to say, okay, for those other kinds of impact, maybe there are numbers. Some of that can be expressed in monetary units, in euros and dollars, what have you, such as the media value we had just earlier, but some can't. Some might be other kinds of numbers, quantities, percentages, whatever. And some of this is going to be narrative, right? Because I think we'd be closing ourselves off to the power of culture if we don't reckon with the power to change narratives, ways of thinking around the world, about the world. And for me, one key path going forward that's completely underutilized and underpowered at the moment is the contribution of culture to the sustainability transition. Culture has an enormously powerful role as a multiplier because it reaches many people. That's key. It's key change in behaviors and attitudes. But also because it's largely immaterial. The value that it creates is largely immaterial in the sense of immaterial of not creating a big footprint on the planet. And so there are methodologies to look at this, but I think this is really where we can get smarter as a sector as a whole over time to really work towards that.
Yeah, and I would have more questions on that, but I'm conscious of time, so I would like to ask you, so really one last question, and if you can answer in one sentence. So there are probably cultural organizations in the audience, and I would like to ask you, so if they have to do one thing differently starting tomorrow to better articulate their value, what would be your advice? Should I start maybe with you, Victoria?
I think focus on the partnership
Okay.
rather than on asking for funding.
Okay.
cultural organizations are already doing so much. And we're asking them to do even more. That's sometimes my conflict, right? But I would say think broadly, think widely, and also challenge some of the frameworks that other people put on you.
Okay, thank you.
Focus on forward explanation on your relevance in the future, not from the past.
Wow, great. Thank you so much, so my dear panelists. Now we're going to open to questions. And of course, so you can ask them questions, but you can also ask questions about the report that you have seen just before. So I know that the first question is always tricky. So who wants to jump into the ocean of questions? So is there a mic somewhere?
No sharks.
Oh.
And there's a question there.
Where?
Yes,
I don't
there.
see it. Oh.
Thanks. Thanks for the panel. It was very interesting. It was briefly mentioned that the tastes are changing as well, I guess. For instance, at the fair, they changed over the last decade. What evolvements of the change of the tastes do you see? What could be the future trends of different tastes of consumers of cultural goods? As for instance, on the TEFAF. It would be probably on you, Stefan, if you can.
Yeah, I know where the question comes from. That is basically.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question. From my remark that we are in current conversations, of course, and I think it's for the fair itself, for the TEFAF itself, how they see the developments for the future. But what we see in general, so I'll take it back to the governance, of course, that you see new generations emerging in all different aspects, also when it comes to the audience of the TEFAF. And the remark I just made, when it comes to the relevance of explaining why you are here or what your reason for existence is that you always have to move together with your target audience, not only now, but also for the future. So you should foresee what the relevant topics and developments are in the near future. In the conversations that we have with TEFAF, we see that they are clearly on that path, but I can probably visualize that you have, of course, younger generations exhibitors and younger generations collectors coming up that have different levels of understanding of art, that are looking at different ways in collecting. And I think, from a broader perspective, but I'm not an expert on that, I'm a politician, is that, let's say, an organization like TEFAF is well equipped to see how that will evolve in the upcoming years, to say. So I can, from my part, see that they're very busy with that. But that goes for all the, let's say, cultural institutions that we have. Also, for instance, for the 3 provincial museums that we have in Limburg, for instance. So it's not only a unique development for the TEFAF, I would say, but for the whole world of culture and art, and also science, of course. And you see, of course, the levels of innovation that are coming up. So the crossroad that we are at, it has all been mentioned: geopolitical influence, innovation influence, shifting generation. That all has an influence on how you are going to develop your future business model, also, for instance, for the TEFAF. Does that answer your question? More or less.
Do you want to add anything? No? Next question.
Thank you so much for this interesting panel. Especially Martin, of course, you focus on societal and environmental impact, and where tourism, for example, is also mentioned. Do you feel, if we look beyond economic impact, societal impact can be seen in tourism, but it can also be local impact, more cohesion within the community? How do these conversations look? Because tourism has also, of course, a negative environmental impact. So how are the conversations looking between, is one more important than the other if we look beyond only economic impact?
Yeah. Thank you. You're getting at a very important topic, which is trade-offs, right? As soon as you look at this broader bouquet of potential impacts, you're also asking yourself, if I have more of this, I might have less of that. Tourism is a classic example, right? If I increase tourism, more money comes into the economy, but maybe if there's over-tourism, there's social disruption, and there is a negative environmental impact depending on how tourists arrive. But this is the case with all major decisions, right? And I think having this full picture just gives us a way of making an informed decision and saying, okay, well, we know that giving this one thing priority will have negative impact somewhere else. But if you only focus on economic impact, we don't see those other impacts elsewhere, right? And so this is where that holistic picture becomes really important. And that's also the sustainability transition is essentially around this, right? We hear often, okay, it's a win-win-win situation, you know, economic, social, and environmental win. There are some situations like that, but others are not like that. And those are the hard decisions that need to be made. And this is a good reason to really look at the full picture.
Thank you, Martin. Good answer. Other question? I don't see. Yes. Yeah, okay, please.
So I would like to ask more in a macroeconomic scale. So in our current landscape of fragmented geopolitics and trade uncertainty, do you believe international hubs like Maastricht can still function as truly neutral ground for cultural diplomacy and global capital flow? Or is the high-level art trade becoming increasingly susceptible to the same protectionist shifts we see in other sectors?
Stefan, can you take this one?
I thought you were going to pick me on that one. It's a very good question. Thank you for that. It's something that's on the top of my head as well, and what you also hear and see when you walking on the fair here, when you talk to exhibitors, but also on the collectors from that side. I strongly believe that, but that's based on the discussion I had the last couple of days, I must admit. Although it's a question that you can think of for another 2 weeks, I think, is that they are not looking across the lines of geopolitics. That's what I see. So they value the fact that there is a hub like the TEFAF here, and it's not so much about political boundaries, I would say. So I think overall what I hear from people when we are discussing this topic is that they really value the hub that the TEFAF is and that Maastricht is in this case. But it's a very valid and good question, I would say. Good audience, Adriana.
But me, TEFAF. So on a Monday morning on top, huh? Wow. So
another question, I think in the back
yes.
there.
Yeah.
So hand that was raised there.
I think the mic is running. There's also one there. Yeah.
Trying to help you, Adriana.
Thank you so much. Private-public partnership.
Yes, thank you very much. I was wondering, since we could see in the study from Deloitte that the visitors made such a huge contribution to the economic impact, and also the other impact, like social inclusion, obviously also focuses on visitor numbers, and we've talked a lot about explaining the reason why. I was just wondering how, especially on a policy level, a governmental decision, either regional, national, international, well, the question comes now. What is kind of the explanation or the advertisement that you give in order to explain to visitors why they should actually visit these kind of events, apart from, you know, the kind of standard explanation of it is good art, or it is kind of, you can see a valuable, socially valuable, culturally valuable object, just in the sense that I think a lot of my friends who don't come from the humanities, it's not enough for them anymore to say, oh, you must go see a Picasso because it's a Picasso, but you need to convince them, I think, on other grounds. Would you agree with that? Or, how do you strategize kind of?
If I may, so I think this is a question for Will. So Will, if you don't mind, so maybe you can answer that question, except if you would like. No, it's fine, do it. Yep. Will, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Adriana. It's obviously something that we think about every single day, and I think actually what Stefan was saying in reply to the last couple of questions is very much connects to this. Well, of course, if you look at TEFAF, and I think we've talked already about being practical and trying to talk about public and private aspects working together today. We are originally at its core a place of commerce, of course. And if you just limit it to that, then I think there's a degree of saying at some point, well, will geopolitical tensions mean at some point that it won't be possible, or this might not be the best place for commerce? But over the 38 editions, or 39 editions that we've had of the fair, we have grown into something that we believe stands for much more, and those things are advantageous for exactly what you just referred to. If you take, for example, the idea that an art fair in a specific location can have a contribution to the local economy, that goes way, that's much a lower threshold than saying we have 15,000 objects that come from all over the world, from all time, that if you just wander around, you'll be talking to the leading expert in that particular category to learn, to engage, to understand that cultural connections have been going back thousands and thousands of years. And that is a challenge for us to try and package that. But it's something that we work very hard on, that we have been privileged to have the support of Maastricht and Limburg in building up that platform.
Thank you, Will, and I think we have to stop here, so we're running out of time, I guess. So I would like to thank my great panelists, so Stefan, Nicolas now, so Martin, of course, so Victoria, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all, I wish you a really great fair, a great summit. Thank you, TEFAF, for organizing that, so thank you very much.
That all of you have come here, like Adriano also said, on the Monday morning, nice and early, 9 a.m. sharp. So thank you for coming, and also thank you for Adriano and the other speakers for this wonderful conversation. As you've already seen, today we will be talking beyond economic impact. And I think Victoria Simons van Krieken already outlined that how Brabant is focusing very much on the social impact. And this will also be the focus for the next conversation, which will be focused on the role in development and social impact beyond economic impact. So we need to wait for a small second because, of course, we need one more chair, so we'll be helping my colleague in a second to arrange this. And then I would like to welcome Hildegard and the remaining panelists onto the stage. So bear with us for 1 second and then we can continue. I would like to welcome Hildegard Schneider, member of the Netherlands Commission for UNESCO, and the other panelists to join me on the stage. Your seats are ready now. Ready for takeoff.
Thank you very much, Simone. And welcome and good morning still to the audience. I'm very glad to see my panelists. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. And Kathleen, would you please sit here? Yeah, so please. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for having invited us again to have a panel as to organize from the UNESCO perspective. Kathleen already gave a very impressive introduction to the UNESCO perspective in her welcoming speech. Now, my name is Hildegard Schneider, as it was said, and I'm a member of the Dutch UNESCO Commission, but I'm also an emeritus professor of Maastricht University. And for many, many years, I was teaching, next to my main subject, European law, a course at Maastricht University called Art and Law, starting a bit as a hobby of myself, but becoming a rather important course in our curriculum. And I say this because I would like to stress also from the importance and not only the economic perspective how many of the alumni of the university come back to Maastricht at the moment of TEFAF to visit again the TEFAF because they got the possibility to visit TEFAF during this course. And many told me that I have started to collect and to be interested in art because they had this possibility. So I would like to also thank the TEFAF for the opportunities to generations of students, because we have taught this for decades, I would say. And I came to Maastricht 45 years ago with the starting of the law faculty, and I saw the changes, and I also saw the change of TEFAF from a very important collection and presentation of the old Dutch masters and other areas, but also this changing of, yes, the exhibition, but also of the changing of the customs and the visitors. So I think it is very important a little bit to look back, but to understand better the future. But that's all I want to say about me. Now I want to introduce my panel. And actually it was interesting that Martin said before also the linkage between culture and the importance of the culture to sustainable development. And so I would like to introduce my first panelist, Joost Vervoort, who is Associate Professor of Transformative Imagination at Utrecht University, but very much interested in the issue of the contribution of creative cultural sector can make to sustainability and to the just society. My second panelist is Marian Duff, who was born in Paramaribo in Suriname and raised in Haarlem, and now is a founding member and director of OSCAM, which stands for Open Space and Contemporary Art Museum, which I think very much shows the importance of inclusivity and innovation in the cultural sector and the space we have to give to the creative sector in a very broad sense. So I hope you can give us later examples where you can show this. Then I introduce John Johnston, who will give us a project, The Paradoxical Value of Culture. Your background is from the Irish connection with the Northern Ireland situation, also the issue of culture and in difficult periods. And I hope your introduction can also show how culture can contribute, but also splits very often societies. Because in the very beginning it was said culture connects societies and people beyond borders. That is certainly true also, as we can see, in your region like Maastricht, but it also can very often become problematic. So that is very important. And we needed a fourth chair because originally we had another panelist, Christiane Matthijssen, as Deputy Director General from Culture and Media of the Dutch Ministry of Education, Culture and Sciences, but she is ill. But I'm very happy that Kathleen was willing to take the chair and to discuss with us the UNESCO perspective, I would say again. So, starting with Joost, you have developed a model in measuring and explaining the influence of culture, but not from an economic perspective, but much more from a sustainability perspective. Could you explain your model, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's going to turn up on screen soon as well. There we go. Yeah, hi everyone. So, I have been part of a research project called Creatures, which was an EU-funded project that ran for a few years and that involved researchers from all across Europe, creative practitioners, funders, and policymakers. And we were really looking for, and we did many things in this project, and it was really, the project was really focused on how do we connect creative practices in cultural sectors to real societal transformations, which is a difficult question. And so many experiments were done and so on, but the thing that we sort of focused on with this model was a question of how do we develop a shared language between creatives and policymakers and funders and foundations and so on, to talk about the transformative power of creative practice. And yeah, we really started with creative practitioners to ask them questions about how would you describe what your contribution is to the world, or how do you feel like you're contributing to the world, not just with one project, but with your entire history of practice, and how do you see that developing into the future. So we had these very rich narratives. We did this with many people across Europe in the project, and out of that, and sort of then bringing that to researchers, various disciplines, and to policymakers and funders and so on, this model came out as as these 9 dimensions that sort of together represent a whole diverse world of ways to think about creative practice and sustainable change and transformative change. Behind each of these 9 dimensions is a whole bunch of research. Basically, what we talked to creatives and to funders and so on, and we asked them, what do you need, you know? And of course, the first idea was to start with very concrete indicators or something like that. But the projects are so different from each other. If you think about making a model that cuts across all creative sectors, from music to game design, to figurative arts and so on, it's super diverse. So what people were looking for more were sort of like underlying logics and theories, like how do we even talk about this? We all know that the arts and cultural sectors and so on, this work matters, but how do we understand the mechanisms at various levels that sort of help us explain what happens? One bias that a lot of people have is sort of at the individual level. That's what I've noticed, or what we noticed with the research. A lot of people think that it's important to look only at individual behavior change, but I think many of us understand that creative practices contribute to culture as a whole. They contribute to the shifting of norms and values, of how ideas are communicated, to societal imaginaries, which is a term that we use a lot in the sort of academic context. So there's much more going on at sort of collective and institutional and societal levels than only, okay, someone visits an exhibition and they have an individual insight and an individual behavior change, like we're reprogramming robots when they come in, right? So this model covers a lot of these things. We start with changing meanings, which is all about sort of this societal work that culture does in terms of shifting understandings and what can be imagined, what people are learning. Embodying is the first one there, because we think because this is research shows us that experience and really feeling things in your body is a very important starting point, right? But this is sort of a level that many artists also talk about their own work. But then actually changing connections is an important sort of cluster of dimensions there as well. Who comes together around art? How do they organize themselves? Does artistic practice inspire new forms of social organization? Artistic practices have a unique benefit in that they bring people together around certain values and aesthetics without sort of prescribing very specific things, right? It's a little bit different to go to a concert, for instance, than to go to a protest right away. They have different functions. Inspiring, how these things travel, and then finally and importantly, changing power. Because we're not just talking about how do we make art that makes culture and society a little nicer. We're talking about systems change, right? And we are in a situation of global encroaching fascism, collapsing societies, genocide, and in that situation, what can art do, right? Many people turn to art to say something, right? But what does that look like, and how does that express itself? So that's very important. One that's part of that is subverting, which is about dismantling and subverting current systems, which is something that I've spoken about this model a lot in the sort of cultural sectors. Many people are interested in this question: how do we dismantle damaging the current systems? But actually working on that is scary for many people, especially if you're part of the establishment and you have a lot. You think you have a lot to lose. But anyway, we live in a crumbling world, so I think it's important to really think about these things as systems change and not just, okay, how do we make it a little bit better, or how do we measure our success and keep things as they are. Yeah.
Thank you. May I ask you already a little bit explain more on the open space contemporary art and make it in so far a little bit more explicit, because you have examples.
Shall we check the videos first?
Yeah. Oh, it's coming.
Hallo, ik ben Nino en ik ben 10 jaar. Ik ben kindermuseumdirecteur omdat ik het mij leuk vind om mijn ideeën te delen met anderen en te bepalen hoe het op kinderdag eruit gaat zien. Celebrate You betekent voor mij dat ik mezelf kan zijn en dat kan vieren. Ik vind dat andere kinderen naar het kinderdagfestival moeten komen, omdat het een gezellige dag wordt en we hebben meerdere activiteiten die we met z'n allen kunnen doen. En ik hoop dat wij jullie kunnen inspireren om beter te worden en jezelf te zijn.
I think we get a second one to explain position.
Ik heb vandaag mijn zus bijgestaan in Gothenburg bij het geven van de rondleiding in de tentoonstelling.
Ja, ik kom van het platteland, van het oosten van Nederland. En dat is Twente. En als je Twente en Suriname nu hebt, zijn er best wel veel overeenkomsten. Want wij gingen vroeger ook altijd naar tantes en oma's. Ik had een werkende moeder. En als die er niet was, die tante of die oma, dan ging je wel, je bent opgevoed door een heleboel tantes en een heleboel oma's. Dus dat is wel heel opvallend.
Dit is een stukje geschiedenis, een stukje cultuur die wij altijd, ten alle tijden, puur moeten houden.
Vandaag was echt een super toffe dag om te praten met alle ouderen in de wijk, hier in Amsterdam Zuidoost. Dat zij hier binnenkomen en dat we onze verhalen konden delen met hun en ook input krijgen van hun. Ik denk dat we dat veel te weinig doen, dat intergenerationele gesprek met elkaar voeren, dat we de wijsheid van de ouderen meekrijgen, dat we het heel niet opnieuw uitvinden, maar ook dat wij kunnen vertellen over hoe wij nu dingen ervaren. Dus die uitwisseling en de wijk hier binnen, ja, dat was wel echt bijzonder.
Thank you. Just before I turn back to you, Joost, how would you say that the Open Space Contemporary Art Museum is following your model, or where would you put it?
I mean, I think you could probably say something about most of these dimensions when I see this, and I think making new connections, the sort of connection level was most obvious, I think, and sharing worlds and sharing imaginations and different ways of seeing the world and bringing that together. I would be very interested to know if something has come out of this, if people have sort of kept in touch, right? If they started doing these things, or how the experiences of this coming together have affected their conversations with their own family members, right? Because so how does this sort of like shift of experience spread? I mean, I've heard some things about how it's hard to do research on these things, but I think it really depends on the discipline, right? I hear a lot about surveys and so on, but I think if you really sit people together, you interview them as a group or as individuals, you follow people for a while, you take part in artistic practices, you can get a lot of deep data on this. And I think that an experience like this shows like it's ripe for that kind of analysis. Yeah.
Perhaps, you can explain now what OSCAM really means and what does it bring to you and how do you deal with it?
OSCAM stands for Open Space Contemporary Art Museum, in short OSCAM. I founded OSCAM like 8.5 years ago, and it's in the middle of the shopping mall, the Amsterdam Sport in Amsterdam Southeast. So you can drop by during shopping or just drop by because you want to see some art and some exhibitions. At OSCAM we connect fashion, art, design, development and craftsmanship with the local community, but we also work with international partners and artists. And I founded OSCAM because in the museum field I didn't often see people look like me, and I wanted to create an open space, but mostly a safe space for people to feel seen, empowered, and also that they feel that their stories are also important. We work mostly with young people, young professionals, and also with kindermuseum directors. And we started just last year with tours for elderly people, seniors, because we think it's important to connect them with our museum because they built Amsterdam Southeast, also known as the Bijlmer, 57 years ago, and they paved the way so that I can do my thing. We can do our thing.
And is it growing?
We started as an organization and a foundation with only freelancers, and since 2 years we also have 12 people with a steady contract, including myself. So I gave up my freelance life. And it's increasing because we see a lot of people from all over the world who wants to see how we build an open space and a safe space. So, we're increasing.
And would you say, because we discussed also the position of TEFAF and the position in Limburg and for the future, would you say that something like this should also be connected to a very established fair like TEFAF?
I think it's important to stay in contact and connect people and artists from all over the world, and also self-taught artists, because we can learn from each other. And if we stay open to learn, then I think it's important to make connections like organizations like ours.
Because, I mean, UNESCO has published also 2 reports now on the culture, and it shows how important the culture is for the newcomers, the society, not so much the establishment, and how important this is for a sustainable development, I would say, in society like the Netherlands. So you would say this is very important, also connect these new developments of art and cultural expression to society as a whole, and including to established art fairs.
For me, the culture is not new. I am the culture. The communities I work with are the culture. So it's important to give them a place in the museum field, the art field, but also at fairs like TEFAF.
Thank you. I now turn to...
Perhaps I may add to what was just said. When we presented our first report, advice that was before this one, onvervangbaar, we presented it to the by then State Secretary for Culture, Gunay Oesloe, and she said, if the established cultural sector is not capable of connecting to the culture, they will not survive. And I think that is a very strong statement that still is very valuable in these days and for the future. Just wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, John, we move from, let's say, a very positive development with the young, with the older, with the culture, to a more traumatic and paradoxical situation of culture. So your statement, I would really like to ask.
Yeah, I mean, my talk is I've got a thing written to read out to you because I've got some images to show you as well of an example of the paradoxical values of culture from my homeland in Ireland. That I'd like to maybe show that first as an inspiration and maybe get into a conversation afterwards. That's okay. You're going to have to be my automatic clicker so I could talk to you, right? So, as an Irishman, to be given 6 minutes to talk isn't easy, I can tell you, but, which is why I'm going to read to you. It's not my norm, but it'll hopefully keep me on track. So the paradoxical values of culture are found in how its fabric is woven out of the threads of a shared, learned and dynamic set of beliefs, practices, behaviours and symbols that define a group's way of life. However, while the fabric represents a sense of identity to one group, it may also alienate another. And in times of international and social tension, and crucially in the dangerous hands of populist rhetoric, this fabric can be woven extremely tightly. So much so that there's very little room for any other threads to exist. This is the fabric of exclusion. In the next 6 minutes or so, I'll attempt to highlight how the values attached to culture can lead to extreme violence, but also can lead to incredible acts of transformation and healing. I do this through the lens of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Change that, please. The good. Culture is formed by elements like language, values, norms, rituals, and material objects, artifacts, education, stories, histories, public displays, architecture, and the design of social space. All these are aspects of culture. It is not innate, but passed through generations, shaping how people interact, communicate, and understand the world. These entities weave the fabric of culture, and as often the case, they intend to touch us, to move our aesthetic being to levels that reach far beyond financial gain or economic interest, and offer us a way to shape our own and community's meaning. Making and accessing culture makes us human. The bad. The former Norwegian peace academic Johan Galtung states that cultural violence are those aspects of culture embedded in the symbolic sphere of our existence that are exemplified by religion and ideology. Language and art, empirical science, can be used to justify or legitimize what is called structural violence, a factor that is supported by political or cultural or social policy which is informed and driven by notions of difference and separation. The ugly. Direct violence represents behaviours that serve to threaten life and in itself and or to diminish one's capacity to meet our basic human needs. Stars, crosses, flags, crescents, anthems and military parades, the ubiquitous portrait of leaders, inflammatory speeches, posters and paintings, theatre, music, education, all these cultural threads can be used to create division, mistrust and promote the type of fear that ultimately leads to hate and physical or direct violence. In the most extreme cases, it can even lead to genocide. Change slide, please. In my homeland of Ireland, these cultural entities have been used throughout history to create two distinct cultural groups based on religion and national identity. On one hand, you have the Irish, historically identified as Catholic. On the other hand, you have the Protestant, historically identified as British. This slide shows on the screen the cultural signs, symbols, artifacts, and even sporting traditions that represent the Catholic Irish. Next slide, please. This slide reflects the cultural identity of the Protestant British. Those in the room who know of the troubled sectarian history of Europe may recognise the character on the left as a Dutch Prince of Orange, King William III. Painted by Jan Wyck in 1688, the work was created prior to the mysterious Battle of the Boyne in 1690, when the Protestant William of Orange defeated the Catholic King James II to secure the Protestants' ascendancy in Ireland. A victory that is celebrated this day through the summer marching season, which can be seen in the image in the top right. From sport to music, flags and public parades, the cultural fabric of my homeland, as with many across the world, is weaved out of threads of the good, the bad and the ugly. Change slide, please. The ugly is present when culture becomes corrupted to such an extent that the images, symbols, language and narratives played out through traditions are used to polarize and divide society into what Henry Toffel describes as in and out groups. This division ultimately leads to direct physical violence. In the context of Northern Ireland, the perceived difference between Protestant British and Catholic Irish is reinforced by such threads, which weave mistrust, fear, hatred into the cultural fabric. These threads overwhelm what is often the beautiful aspects of culture. So much so that it leads to extreme violence, and as in the case study which I'm about to show you, the death of a young boy whose only crime was to be born into a different cultural identity to those who murdered him. Next slide, please. In this context, the corrupt threads of culture need to be exposed and unpicked and seen and discussed. As an artist and a cultural worker, I've done this with two groups of young people, one Catholic Irish, the other Protestant British. Both groups come from the same town where a boy was killed. The Catholic kids knew the murdered boy, the Protestant kids knew many, if not all, of those accused of his murder. In these moments, the artist becomes a cultural worker, drawing on the power of the arts to form a transformative tool that helps people learn their way out of conflict. I see this in 4 stages of transformation. The first is to expose the corrupted threads. The second is to separate them and question their source and effect. The third is to reimagine new threads. And the fourth is to weave these into the fabric in order to make new meaning and transform the behaviours and attitudes that the corrupt threads foster. Such transformation can only come by unravelling the threads of mistrust, fear and hatred. And this we done with surgical precision. Flying in the face of social researchers who said it was not possible, we not only held the symbols of the other in our hands, we reclaimed them and painted them. The language of division was exposed and reimagined to form two distinctly different paintings that on the surface looked like they reinforced division. However, the icons of Protestant Britishness were painted by Catholic Irish and vice versa. Then the paintings and the kids came together and they chose to paint over their work and design a new collective narrative. After an intense period of dialogue, the two paintings became one, and the young people followed the art's lead and also became one. We discussed and named the words that caused the death of the boy, and then these were transferred in order of greatest importance and significance onto the surface of the painting. Last slide, please. And at the centre of their artwork, they painted the word school, which translates to me as education, one of the pillars of culture. The last act of transformation was, in my opinion, one of the most honest and ethically grounded motions I've ever seen delivered by young people caught in the front line of conflict and coming from what was seen as opposing sides. They tore strips of the surface of the painting to reveal the reality that remains at the heart of the cultural division. Some elements of the original image came back into view, and in doing so they disturbed the picture plane. This was deliberate, and in some way, it is why I share this art with you today and place it in the midst of what some would say or declare as high culture. This painting, like Picasso's Guernica, highlights the paradoxical values of culture. How can something so beautiful be so disturbing? How can something heighten our aesthetic being while holding a mirror to our inhumanity? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Perhaps, Pauline, I can turn to you in this relation to what John just presented. How would you say this, because you mentioned this already, the spirit of UNESCO, but which needs today, and still, I would say, in some extent also in Ireland, how we can help with culture to come up with understanding.
Yes, actually, what already in this this whole morning actually called my attention. First of all, the words that were spoken by Martin Müller, who we also call Nicholas, is saying culture as a multiplier is what I hear again. And it is so important what has been brought forward already. Thinking of culture as a multiplier is the measuring. It all comes to the measuring, also when you talk about funding. And that is what we wanted to bring forward as National UNESCO Commission with our advice, the importance of the culture. What do you measure? How do you measure? And that is why your 9-dimension model is so important, because we have to change our mindset to really value what's going on and step away from what you were saying in this fragmenting world, step away from the way we used to do the things. What you were mentioning now in your very impressive words is we hear it so often, it is not possible. We are used to do it this way, so forget the other ways. And you at OSCAM are showing us that everything is possible. And you know, that is what we UNESCO stand for. You know, culture is humanity, and it is far beyond what we have always considered the way of doing things, what we call normal. It is about inclusivity, it is about creating safe spaces, and realizing that the way that we are used to do things is often excluding, while culture is the tool we all have at our hands to use it to connect. So this very much summarizes what I have heard so far.
Yes,
Hildegard. And is this answering your question?
But how would you say that policy and politics need to change to support this view on culture, the art, and our society?
Yeah, definitely politics has to open its eyes for this, and that is why we were so happy when the then Secretary of State said the cultural institutions, the network we have on cultural, they have to open their eyes and minds to what is going on. And I've been in politics myself. Well, I say once a politician, always a politician. I've been a member of Dutch Parliament for over 10 years, and there I have